Throughout Doctor Who's decades-long history, Daleks have been described and depicted as ruthless, ferocious, emotionless murderers whose sole purpose is to exterminate all other forms of life. Genetically engineered cyborgs, lacking concepts of elegance and wonder, who seek only to conquer, exploit, enslave, and destroy. The idea of Daleks indulging in things like music, literature, poetry, or artwork is laughable. These things contradict everything the Daleks stand for. And yet, throughout all the Dalek stories in Doctor Who's history, we've seen examples of what can only be described as Dalek artwork. The earliest examples of this Dalek art can be found in the very first Dalek story, within the Dalek city. We see the corridors and junction rooms of this place are decorated with what appear to be sculptures. In fact, at one point, one of these statues is dropped down a lift shaft by Ian, Barbara and Susan in order to slow down an approaching Dalek. The Dalek city also gives us our first look at Dalek architecture, which goes through several different design iterations across Classic Who and New Who. Rather than using a standard, simple design for all of their ship interiors, Daleks have employed a wide range of different architectural styles and design details, possibly indicating some slow degree of artistic or at the very least architectural development across the various Dalek generations. Another particular example of Dalek artwork are the carvings found either side of the entrance to their base on Spyridon. These carvings, the props for which were based on the sculptures of Barbara Hepworth, appear to resemble Dalek eye stalls. The interior of the city is much as one would expect from Dalek architecture, cold and functional. However, the unusual rock carvings outside indicate a modicum of artistic expression. The same logic can also be applied to the presence of hemispheres on various examples of Dalek technology and architecture. These do not seem to serve any practical purpose, and are there simply as a reflection of the Dalek design itself, posing some interesting questions regarding the Dalek self-identity. Are depictions of eye stalks and bumps considered to have special significance to the Daleks? Despite their nature as emotionless drones, do they feel some sense of kinship towards these purely aesthetic affectations? There are also examples of practical Dalek technology showing signs of artistic or creative merit. Their ID tags, for example, form a sort of rudimentary language, though we do not fully understand it, being able to only infer the meanings of the tags based on the known role of the Dalek in question. Dalek laboratories, spaceship bridges and special chambers are also constructed with a similar artistic style. Does this point to the possibility of a particular Dalek rank that is granted a certain degree of artistic skill by the Emperor in order to create Dalek designs? If the cult of Skaro could be imbued with the ability to imagine in order to formulate plans to ensure the Dalek race's survival, perhaps the Emperor has also created a Dalek architect, whose purpose is to scour the pathweb for ideas and create designs for new Dalek ships, structures and technology, aided by the fact that it has been imbued with a particular artistic flair. Perhaps even one that is fed using harvested brainwaves from the most brilliant artistic minds sourced from worlds that the Daleks have conquered.
Daleks are the supreme beings.
Join the Dalek Empire with this awesome Dalek attack vehicle.
Exterminate! Oh no! The Daleks have joined the battle! Time to get out of here!
Although outwardly resembling robotic tanks, Daleks are living things, and some of the best Dalek stories are ones that bridge the gap between the Daleks as ruthless killing machines and the Daleks as creatures trying to survive. One key trait of a good Dalek story is that it tells a story that could not have been told if the Daleks were substituted for any other generic robotic warrior villains. Writers can do this in many ways, by focusing on the Dalek mutant creature, writing storylines involving Daleks leaving their casings or altering their genetic makeup, or by furthering a pre-established Dalek concept and using it in a story, such as Dalek Civil War storylines or stories involving Davros. However, an underrated aspect of the Daleks as characters that can also be used by writers is arguably one of the few positive aspects of the Daleks, their culture. Despite their nature as exterminators, Daleks have a strong sense of camaraderie and kinship with other Daleks, and as such a strong cultural identity has taken shape across the many Dalek stories over the years. We previously covered the more incongruous aspects of Dalek culture, their artwork, which could be either a rare form of Dalek self-expression or simply a leftover motif from the Khaleds or symbols designed to invoke fear in their enemies, and another seemingly out-of-character idea for the Daleks is mentioned in Series 1 of Doctor Who, and that is the idea of Dalek legends. Stories are one of the cornerstone aspects of a culture, and the Doctor talks about there being ancient legends of the Dalek homeworld, in which he is called the Oncoming Storm, the Dalek name for the Doctor. This would indicate, therefore, that the legends themselves are also Dalek in origin, meaning that Daleks must have some form of capacity for storytelling, even if it is just sharing reports from the pathweb. These legends could be an invention of another species, or an exaggeration on the Doctor's part, but it is interesting to consider that Daleks could tell stories. If so, it will be a key indicator of some element of culture in their society. But there are many other ways in which Dalek culture manifests that is much more in character for them. For example, there have been several references in the past to a Dalek language. We see Dalek numerals appear in several episodes on screen readouts or across the Dalek Eye Stalk's POV, not to mention the many examples of Dalek identification tags from New Who. Missy and the 12th Doctor both make references to Dalek language, implying that they have a lexicon that is completely separate to that of English or any other language in the universe, raising questions as to how their victims across time and space are able to understand them. Perhaps the ear lamps on the Dalek are psychic translators that allow Dalek speech to be interpreted by anyone? That's just a theory. Another aspect of Dalek culture that is related to their language is the concept of Dalek poetry. While it might initially seem laughable, Daleks have been shown in the past to have a rudimentary concept of poetry. Just take a listen to some of their battle cries.
Advance and attack.
Line and advance.
Advance and attack.
Attack and destroy. Destroy and rejoice.
Exterminate, annihilate, destroy. Daleks conquer and destroy. Daleks conquer and destroy. Daleks conquer and destroy. Daleks conquer and destroy.
Seek and locate. Seek and locate. Do not deviate.
Welcome to my Dalek poetry reading. This one is called Daffodils. Exterminate daffodils!
Okay, so while they're not exactly Wilfred Owen, Daleks are able to string together words to create memorable sounding battle cries, which for a species of genetically engineered war machines who claim to lack all emotion except hate and fear, is about as creative and poetic as you'd imagine they could get. Nonetheless, there have been several other examples of Daleks who have been slightly more nuanced and creative with their wordplay, such as the Dalek Emperor trying to get a little rhyme in there.
Purify the earth with fire. The planet will become my temple and we shall rise. This will be our paradise.
And who could forget the witty banter between Dalek Sec and the Cyber Leader, which proved once and for all that the Daleks have a concept of sass.
Daleks, be warned. You have declared war upon the Cybermen.
This is not war. This is pest control.
We have 5 million Cybermen. How many are you? 4. You would destroy the Cybermen with 4 Daleks.
We would destroy the Cybermen with 1 Dalek. You are superior in only one respect.
What is that?
You are better at dying.
Speaking of Dalek hierarchs, another aspect of Dalek history that presents some evidence of a deeply buried culture is the chronology of their leadership system. Having had emperors, supremes, primes, supreme councils, and even a time controller, the Daleks eventually settled for a parliamentary system, in which high-ranking Dalek governors feed warfare and logistics information into a central Dalek Prime Minister, who directs the entire empire. Whilst not a democracy in the truest sense, it does reflect an aspect of political evolution, which is at the very least a shadow of culture for a society. And speaking of the Dalek Prime Minister, through him we learn that the Daleks are continuing to explore their own psyche, and are still making discoveries regarding the scope of their capabilities. Despite several Daleks previously claiming that Daleks have no concept of things like elegance or beauty, the Dalek Prime Minister reveals to the Doctor that he believes the Daleks do possess a concept of beauty. It's just that their frame of reference for how beautiful something is depends on how much hate they can see in it. This suggests that behind the scenes, Dalek leaders and other high-ranking Dalek units are continuing to adapt and innovate in terms of their philosophy, which is also evidence of some rudimentary culture. In conclusion, while there are several scattered examples of Daleks demonstrating some evidence of possessing a culture, it is unclear as to whether this is something that they themselves are aware of, or if it is simply a byproduct of their genetic engineering. It is possible that any hints of culture that we see in the Daleks are simply reflections of Davros's personality and narcissism, but there are some hints that the Daleks do truly possess the ability to adapt and change over time in certain ways, so who knows what the future holds for them.
Compute time lag by Earth scale.
Computer reading 15 Earth minutes.
What are the pronouns of the Daleks? Generally speaking, Daleks are referred to as it. This reflects their status not only as beings who do not identify themselves by gender, but also as creatures who are distinctly inhuman, in many ways more robotic in a metaphorical sense than they are living. Daleks are genetic mutants, they are not a naturally occurring life form, and their apparent lack of any gender or sexuality further distinguishes them from the majority of the sentient beings of the universe we have seen that they are committed to exterminating, most notably humanity. However, there are several distinct examples of Daleks in Doctor Who that are referred to by a specific pronoun, the pronoun in question always being he/him. Usually, it is only distinct individual Daleks who are referred to in this way, primarily high-ranking commanders. Several Supreme Daleks have been referred to as he. The Dalek Emperor is referred to by his own Daleks as him. Dalek X from Prisoner of the Daleks is described as a he, and both Dalek Sec and Dalek Khan of the Cult of Skaro are also identified using he/him. These latter two examples are particularly significant, as Sec is referred to as he following his fusion with Diagoras, who also appears to identify as male, and Dalek Khan is referred to as he by Davros, the creator and primary authoritative source of information on Daleks, who also identifies as male. The Time Controller and Time Strategist are identified using he/him pronouns, with the case of the Time Strategist also being significant, as the original form of this specific Dalek, the duplicate Adelaide Dutton, identifies as female, but once the Time Strategist is created, the characters in the story refer to it using he/him pronouns. It is also notable to point out that there are several other examples of prominent Dalek characters who are referred to as it, not he, such as the Metaltron. There are several interesting questions that we can draw from this. For one, why the distinction of pronouns between lower ranking and higher ranking Daleks? It could be interpreted as a fundamental, albeit rarely addressed, aspect of Dalek society. Standard Daleks are called drones and do not have individual identities, whereas higher ranking Daleks are allowed a greater degree of autonomy and personal expression, and as such are referred to as he to denote their distinction from the drones and acknowledge their greater degree of self-identity. However, this leads us to the second question: why the masculine association? Out of universe, the answer to this question is blatant and simple. Daleks were created in the 1960s, and for the vast majority of their existence as a concept, general understanding of the distinction between gender, sexuality and self-identification has been at best muddied and at worst non-existent. This isn't an issue in itself as far as the Daleks are concerned. I'm not talking about this to try to levy any kind of blame against the creators of the Daleks for being ignorant of concepts that were not widely discussed or understood during their lifetimes. That wouldn't be fair. I'm simply pointing out that it's an interesting aspect of the characterization of the Daleks. Same goes for the Cybermen. In their very name, Cybermen, these partly robotic, genderless and distinctly inhuman creatures are defined as masculine, despite the fact that Cybermen assimilate people of all genders into their collective. It is worth noting that, for the majority of stories in which they appear, Daleks are primarily referred to as it, not he. Same goes for Cybermen. So while it is possible that the use of he to refer to specific individuals from each species could be a reflection of stereotypical masculine associations, this isn't a universal association. It only applies to very specific individuals. There is also a possible in-universe explanation for this. As previously mentioned, Davros also uses he/him pronouns, and as the 12th Doctor says in Series 9, everything Davros is, the Daleks are. Could it be that the graduation of high-ranking Daleks from being referred to as it to being referred to as he is an illustration of these specific Daleks unconsciously, or perhaps even deliberately, bringing themselves closer to the personality and self-identification of their creator? Ultimately, these are questions that are difficult to answer. This specific aspect of the Dalek identity has not been explored or even directly addressed by the show, and as with a lot of elements of Dalek lore and history, there may not be a single definitive answer.
All systems fully operational. Ship weaponry charged. Give us a cargo. Capital city of Japan now in optimum firing range.
One of the biggest misconceptions in the history of Doctor Who is the idea that Daleks have no emotions. Cybermen are, in theory, meant to have no emotions. Daleks are designed to channel one specific emotion: hate. Both the Daleks and their creator Davros maintain that all emotions have been removed from pure Daleks except hate, giving them a personality that is defined by paranoid, incessant xenophobia. However, as the Doctor points out in The Parting of the Ways, Daleks must therefore feel at least one other emotion: fear. The burning hate that they feel also causes them to feel intense fear. Fear of the Doctor, their greatest enemy, fear if their vision is impaired and they can't see anymore, fear when their elaborate plans go terribly wrong and they aren't in control anymore. We've seen this emotion from the Daleks many times. So what other emotions do they feel? Perhaps the most common emotion that Daleks are shown to feel alongside hate and fear is impatience. Daleks are quick to lose their temper, and sometimes their anger proves to be their undoing, as their predictable responses can be learned and exploited under the right circumstances. Dalek Supremes in particular are shown to be angry and impatient when demanding information, repeating the word "explain" over and over again in an increasingly panicked voice. Daleks have also been shown to become irate and impatient when things aren't going their way, such as when dealing with mercenaries or human sympathisers. Another emotion that Daleks often show is pride, something that Davros himself notes in the Stolen Earth when the Supreme Dalek proclaims Dalek victory over humankind. Davros is keenly aware of the fact that pride can be a weakness, and yet it seems he's been unable to remove the emotion from the Dalek's genetic makeup. Perhaps because he is such a prideful specimen himself, he's not capable of excising such a core part of himself from his creations. While pride can be a positive emotion under the right circumstances, unfortunately in the Dalek mindset it only manifests as part of the Daleks' fervent obsession with their own perceived purity, and insistence that they are the superior species of the universe. As a result, another emotion that Daleks clearly possess is a concept of camaraderie, as they show instinctive trust and familiarity towards others of their kind, provided that they are of the same genetic stock. Daleks have been fooled in the past by humanoids using Dalek casings as a disguise, and have been shown to be almost paralysed with shock at the idea of a fellow Dalek turning against them. This shows that the Dalek concept of camaraderie runs deep, and is perhaps as close if not closer than the relationship between individual insects within a colony. The more Daleks that are grouped together, the more they begin to act as a gestalt entity with one specified leader compared to smaller groups of individual Daleks. Once again, the Dalek concept of camaraderie stems from a negative aspect of their personality. They tolerate others of their kind as opposed to wanting to exterminate them, as they do with everything else in the universe, and for a Dalek, simply not wanting to kill you is as friendly as it gets. This is perhaps a controversial point, but Daleks are also capable of feeling at least some degree of jealousy or envy. One of the deep-rooted causes of Dalek hatred for all other life forms is the inescapable knowledge that many other living things in the galaxy can enjoy aspects of life that are denied to the Daleks. Rather than fostering a desire for change within the Daleks, it simply drives them with yet another reason to kill. Daleks also express envy in other ways. They take territories as a means of expanding their empire, constantly scheming and planning conquests of other worlds. There is even some evidence of envy within the Dalek ranks. The sheer triumph in Dalek Khan's voice when he usurps the position of leader from Dalek Sec is indicative of that. And finally, Daleks appear to be able to experience some semblance of happiness, but not in the way we understand it. Daleks have been shown to be thrilled by the process of extermination, and outright jubilant at the prospect of victory. Again, what could be a positive emotion felt by the Daleks is twisted in their psyche to relate to death and destruction. Daleks are only really happy, if you can even call it that, when they are conquering and destroying. In a way, we have perhaps proven that while Daleks are clearly capable of feeling other emotions besides hate, each and every one of those emotions has been twisted or subverted by their hate until it is almost unrecognisable compared to its human equivalent. In some ways, this is perhaps worse. As Missy says, Cybermen suppress emotion, but Daleks channel it. They aren't as radically different from us as they are simply because they lost their emotions, like the Cybermen did. The Daleks are worse because they still have emotions. It's just that their emotions are so contorted and malformed by their genetic engineering and evil programming that they are barely comparable to ours anymore. And yet, the existence of even a modicum of emotion in the Dalek psyche is a cause for hope. Perhaps one day these fledgling emotions will be the catalyst for a change within the Dalek regime, as they learn to reject their programming and embrace change. Time will tell, it always does.
Join the Dalek Empire with a menacing Dalek voice changer helmet.
Obey the Daleks!
I can communicate with the Master by carefully controlled breaking of wind.
Could I be tied to a different chair?
Silence!
Bye-bye! Don't forget to click below to subscribe to
Dalek bumps.